Today is deadlift day and I've got a present for you guys. I'm going to teach you guys how to structure your deadlifts over the long term so that you can have a nice and strong deadlift. But first, why should you listen to me? Because the techniques that I teach are the same ones that I use to help Hafthor Bjornsson deadlift 510 kilograms, as well as 505 kilograms, as well as 501 kilograms to be the strongest conventional deadlifter on the planet. And I'm going to be teaching this to you guys. Now, this came from a request in the messages on one of the last videos where someone said, can you please do the same thing that you've done for your squats and your bench presses and teach us how to set up your long-term phasing for your deadlifts? And I thought, I'm sure I've done that plenty of times, but you know what? Why not? I'm going to do it again. Now, what I've just done is warmed up. So my deadlift warm up was 270 kilograms for a single. Now, based on last week, my max was 300. So this is 90% of my max for a top single as a way to potentiate the work that I'm going to do. Now, that is just my strategy. That's just my little bit of fun. You don't have to do that. And that's probably not what I would write in a program. This is just me just training intuitively. I'm not training for a competition. But either way, what my main work is today is paused deficit deadlifts. And the goal is 220 kilograms for 3 sets of 3. So I'm going to show you that. It's my favorite, well, one of my favorite accessories. There are so many amazing ones. One of my favorite deadlift accessories. I'm going to talk you through that. But I'm also going to teach you guys how to structure your deadlifting program over a 12-week program. 12 weeks is not really a long amount of time, but it's a great way of visualizing, a start, a middle term, and an end for your deadlift phase. Now, this is where I consider all of our programs can use the similar structure, and it's based on original text of Periodization by Tudor Bumper. Talks about long-term programming. Now, 12 weeks isn't very long, but it's kind of like an exaggerated version of what you would do in the long term. Now, the 3 phases are essentially accumulation phase to start, which is high volume. Then we go to the transmutation phase or intensification phase, which is the lower volume and heavy loads. And then we go to the realization phase, which is the peaking phase. Now, a lot of high-level athletes spend a lot more time than 4 weeks on each of these phases. However, we're going to fast track it and give you a 12-week program, mainly because people are in a hurry to get the most out of themselves. The first phase is kind of like a high rep phase. It's a high volume phase, and it's something that I like to start everyone on, especially with your deadlift journey. The deadlift is one of those exercises that a lot of people have injured themselves on. They say the deadlift is a dangerous exercise. Now it's like, well, there's a bit of truth behind that, but also, a bit of you just weren't doing it properly. Okay, so what does it mean to do it properly? Well, I was a culprit of that. When I first started deadlifting, I quickly realized that it was the strongest lift that I have in the gym. So it's stronger than my squat, my bench press, all of the barbell exercises, the deadlift is the strongest. And it's fun to do the strongest exercise. You enjoy doing that. And every week you put on more weight in the beginning of your training years, and you can just go heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. And you keep on going heavier until something goes pop. And that was me. And actually, in my experience as a coach, that's so many people that I talk to about their deadlifting journey have injured their backs in their early years of their training, doing the exact same approach. So therefore, if you're doing that approach, take it from me, that's the wrong approach. So if you were to employ me as your coach, I wouldn't have you on a heavy deadlift phase, especially to begin with. It would take a while of training with me before I get you to start deadlifting heavy. The reason for that is one of the things that I learned from a fellow by the name of Professor Stuart McGill. He's one of the best spine researchers in the world, and he talks a lot about spine strength in terms of rehabilitation. And he talks about his long-term coaching for his rehabilitation, and the first thing that he looks at is building strength endurance as the first phase for anyone's rehabilitation journey. Now, when I'm programming for people or in my entire experience as a coach, something that I've learned is the techniques that we use to rehabilitate a body align very closely with the techniques that we use to strengthen a body. Strength and joint health and rehabilitation kind of overlap in many, many ways. This is what I learned when I rehabilitated my back because I came off a deadlifting injury. The first thing that I learned to rehabilitate my back was to start doing lighter loads and higher reps. Now, the way that I did that was a technique that forces you to not be able to lift very heavy, which is a snatch grip deadlift from a deficit. Now, that's not the only method that you can use. That's just the method that I used, and I use it very successfully. And because of the success I had with it, I applied it to all of the people that I work with, including Thor Bjornsson. When I first started working with him, that was one of our first phases that we trained. It was a high volume phase with snatch grip deadlifts from a deficit. I learned that from my mentor, Charles Poliquin. Now, just to paint a picture, I deadlifted I injured my back attempting a 240 kilogram deadlift. My max at the time was 220, which is 5 blue plates, and that was a really nice milestone, and I smoked it. It came up really easily, and I thought, let's just keep on going. And so I put 240 kilograms on, missed it, and my back was very sore. For about a year, it was very sore. And every week I'd come back and try and deadlift, and I wasn't able to get past 140 kilograms without my back hurting. So it was very frustrating. I still tried. I wanted to deadlift because deadlift is, like it's a badass exercise. And it's one of the best strength exercises for good reason. But I just wasn't able to do it. But I was just determined to get it back. And it wasn't the right approach. I kept on coming in. Every time I got up to 140 kilograms, my back would hurt and I wasn't able to deadlift. Anyway, Charles Poliquin prescribed this program for me, and it was Snatch Grip Deadlifts from a Deficit, and the start weight was 100 kilograms. So I looked at it and I thought, okay, 100 kilograms, I can do that without pain. I haven't trained my deadlifts in such a long time, may as well give it a start. So anyway, I started on 100 kilograms. Now, this program, 10 sets of 6 reps, okay, that comes from German volume training. So if anyone knows what German volume training is, it's pretty much 10 by 10 on the biggest compound exercise, popularized by the Germans, and it was used to hypertrophy or build muscle in the off season. So that's where Charles Poliquin borrowed that idea from. So it's 10 sets of 6 reps, so you don't have to do 10. 10 sets of 6 reps with Snatch Grip Deadlift from a Deficit. So Snatch Grip is using a wide grip, which makes you have to travel a longer range of motion, which makes it harder. And then standing on a deficit, which makes you have to travel further again, which makes it harder again, which is another reason why you can't lift as heavy. Really long range of motion, 10 sets is very fatiguing, so therefore you can't lift as heavy. So we've got to reduce the load again. The next thing was 5-second eccentric. So the 5-second eccentric makes the movement harder again. So it's like so many different angles, so many different ways of making that movement really, really hard. So for me, doing 100 kilograms for 10 sets of 6, by the way, if you do that program, don't do it without straps. You just won't be able to, not effectively. So that program, for the first time in a year, gave me a stimulus. Like, it didn't hurt my back. I finished the entire program and it was like, wow, this feels great. My back muscles are stimulated. Airplane. And because of that, I, was happy about my training. My training morale was high, and it's like, great, we're deadlifting again. Now, the incremental increases from week to week weren't high. So, you can go up 2.5% to 5%. So that's usually the way that I set up my programming, is to set you up so that you can start light, so that you can add anywhere between 2 to 5% of load every week. So for me, you can go from 100 kilograms, 105, 110, 115, and so on. I did this program for 6 rotations, so it's 2 times a week, which meant I did it for 3 weeks, going up by, I don't know what it was, 2.5 or 5 kilograms each session. It was not much. And I finished on a very light weight. I started on 100, and I think I finished around 120 kilograms, something like that, maybe even less. Anyway, after the 3-week phase, I came back on week 4, and my back was feeling great. I had 6 successful sessions of this deadlift phase, and I came back, and this is the wrong approach, but I did it anyway. I tested my max. So that's not what you do. If you come back from rehab, don't come back, don't think you've rehabbed and then think it's a brilliant idea to come back and test your max. But anyway, I was young and that was me. I made plenty of mistakes, but that was one of them that luckily I was able to achieve without hurting myself again. Anyway, I came back to 220 kilograms, and I was able to do it after a year of not being able to go heavy. I didn't go over 140 kilograms for the entire year. Came back after 6 rotations of that program, where the most I'd lifted was like 120 kilograms, and I got 220 pretty comfortably. I dare say that I could have gone heavier. However, if anyone's experienced low back pain before, you'll understand that there's a psychological barrier that you need to cross when you're rehabilitating. When you go through low back pain for over a year and you understand how painful it is, you don't want to go back there. So for me, that number was 220 kilograms. I'd gotten there and it's like, okay, last time I got beyond here, I hurt myself, so I was petrified to go beyond there. So anyhow, got to 220 kilograms again, and that was me, pain-free, back to deadlifting again. So I was very, very happy. And this is what I did as a coach. All of these stimulus that I applied on myself, I then realized this is a great idea, and I'm going to give it to my clients as well that were suffering from low back pain or wanting a low back rehabilitation program. So I was giving it out to my clients that wanted to repair their low back pain. And I was getting the same success, which was, sore low back, give them 10 sets of 6 with a Snatch Grip Deadlift from a Deficit, and then come back and their deadlift was a lot stronger.
So then I started realizing, you know what, it's just making people strong. It's not just about rehab, it's making people strong. I'm not gonna wait for when people are injured before I give them a high volume phase. So what I started to do was anytime people would start working with me, the start block of their long-term journey was 10 by 6 snatch grip deadlift from a deficit. So if anyone's worked with me, you'll be able to vouch for that. And if you've worked with me, put it in your comment section below and let me know your experience, your love-hate relationship with that snatch grip protocol. I hate doing it, but I love the results. And I'd say that that's pretty much the same response from many people. But anyway, that's phase 1. So that's a high volume phase. And this is what I recommend for everyone that starts their deadlift journey, is to consider high volume, low loads for their deadlift. It doesn't have to be snatch grip deadlift from a deficit. It could be Romanian deadlifts with high rep range. It could be, any deadlift pattern that you want, but build strength endurance first. I learned that from Professor Stuart McGill from his rehabilitation protocols. I don't think that Charles Poliquin learned that from Stuart McGill. Maybe he did, but either way, I used his protocols and they aligned, and it was a very successful result. So there's phase 1 of your program. 10 sets of 6, snatch grip deadlift from a deficit, and you don't have to do accessories after that. I'll tell you now, it's hard, and you don't need to do accessories. Now, my calculations, whenever I'm writing this for somebody, I'll tell you the loads that I choose, which is very important for your programming. I'm gonna wait till the airplane goes. How heavy you lift, if you mess that up, that can make the program very ineffective. If you go too heavy, you could injure yourself, it's just not right. And if you go too light, you're not gonna provide enough stimulus. Now, let me tell you how I calculate my percentages for this specific program. I consider what's your max conventional deadlift, not sumo. So don't calculate it from sumo, it's different. What's your max conventional deadlift? So let's just call it 200 kilograms. You should be able to do 100 kilograms. So 50% of your max is what you should be able to do. But what I like to do for any of my programs is start conservative. Okay, so I say if you've got a 1 rep max of 200 kilograms, you should be able to do 50% of that. But to start conservative, I don't want to do what you should be able to do. I want to go lighter than that. So I say, figure out your 1 rep max and do 45% of that. So therefore, start on 90 kilograms. If you've got a 200 kilogram deadlift, start on 90 kilograms. If you've got a 100 kilogram deadlift, start on 45 kilograms, and so on. And that allows you to be able to go up by 5% jumps each week. So if you start on 45% of your max, you can go 45, 50, 55, and then finish on 60% of your max. Okay, so that's roughly what you should be able to do if you want to do calculations for the first 4 weeks of your 12-week program. That's for free. You don't have to pay me. That's the whole session. It'll probably take 50 minutes to finish the session. You don't need to do accessories. Airplane. Okay, so the way that I do that is I also include 3 minutes rest, which if you know me, 3 minutes is not a long time. For some people it might be, but trust me, take 3 minutes rest between sets, which means 10 sets of 3 minutes rest is 30 minutes of just resting, plus a minute for the set. So that's 40 minutes for the work from first work set to the last work set. That's 40 minutes, plus the warm up to get there. How long does it take you to warm up? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, there's 50 minutes. And then you're gonna wanna lay down on the floor on your back for 5 to 10 minutes after that. There's your hour. You don't need to do accessories. A lot of people say, should I do hamstrings after that or calves or whatever? It's like, if you must. But a lot of the times, if you feel that stimulus, you won't feel like doing anything. You're gonna have a mega back pump. If you've chosen 45% of your max, it's not gonna hurt you. It's gonna be good. Now, there's first phase of your program. That's a high volume phase, okay? The way that it's defined in the texts by Tudor Bomper, periodization, is that's your accumulation. Next phase is transmutation, which is what I'm going to go through. That's pretty much what I'm at, which is where we turn that muscle that we've built, that work capacity that we've built, and now we start building strength. Now, before I go into the strength phase, I'm going to set up my barbell and I'm going to start re-warming up so that I can do my strength phase.
All right. I don't know how that looked in terms of if it looked like I had more in the tank, more reps. I'm sure I did. However, it's still hard. It's still hard. 3 by 3, it's not an outrageous amount of volume. I wasn't recording. Something that I say with this exercise, because you're pausing, it's increasing the time under tension per repetition. So when you consider what's a good rep range for this exercise in particular, don't count 1 rep as a normal rep because it's longer time under tension per repetition. So I say it's about 1.5 reps. So 3 is more like 4.5, 5 reps, which I believe is kind of, sweet spot when it comes to strength. So back to strength building. So this is phase 2 of your 12-week program. Now, phase 2 is you've just done this high volume work and you've built work capacity, you've built strength endurance. And now, so that's the accumulation phase. You then go into the transmutation phase. We turn that bigger, so hypertrophied, conditioned muscle into stronger muscle. So this is where we reduce the volume and increase the loads. So I just told you, snatch grip deadlift from a deficit, we're working between 45 to 60%. That's for that program. I'm not saying it's 45% across the board, but for that specific program, that's the protocols that I use. And trust me, you'll need it. It's hard. Now, for this one, strength is the next phase. You have to understand when it comes to strength, a lot of people talk about the appropriate rep ranges for strength, and they say 1 to 6 reps is a strength rep range. To a large degree, I agree. However, parts of that I disagree, and that is the reason why we say 1 to 6 reps for strength is because you need to be lifting heavy. How heavy? Kind of like 80% and upwards. Now, what's 80% when you talk about how many reps can you do of 80%? It's usually kind of like 6. So anywhere between 6 reps and under, so 0 to 6 reps is strength training. However, when it comes to progressing over the long term, you still need to include volume. You can't just come in and do 1 set of 1 at 100%, like that's maximal intensity, and expect if you just do that every week, you're just going to get stronger because you're not doing enough volume. You need to include the volume work, especially to maintain or even build muscle. So this is where I say kind of 1 and 2 reps. I don't really think that is very good for strength building. It's good for testing the skill of strength, teaching the body how to understand what the heavy load feels like, which is important if your goal is to do a 1 rep max. You need to feel what a 1 rep max feels like. However, that rep range isn't the best for building strength. So I say strength building rep ranges is kind of 3 to 6. So I've just gone on a high volume phase. The next phase, choose your deadlift pattern, 3 to 6 reps, strength phase. So for me, I still don't like to go straight up deadlifts. I mean, sometimes I will. It's a great way of doing it. But I'd choose this exercise for my strength. So pause deficit deadlifts. Today I did 3 by 3. You can do 4 by 4. I also prescribe that, anywhere between the 3 to 6 rep range for your deadlifts. Now we're starting to lift heavier loads, but not so heavy like the 1 and 2 rep range. Even 3 rep range is kind of like borderline lowest on the strength building phase. But the reason why it's fine for me now is because I'm adding a pause and a deficit. I'm not going as heavy. The heavier the load, the higher the risk of injury. So it's not just how hard you work, like this is really hard, I can have a higher deficit. If I put another deficit the same height as that, that'd be really, really hard. But because the load is a much lower percentage of my max, the risk of injury is a lot lower. Okay, so this is part of getting strong is factoring in, I don't want to get injured. So you're building enough strength around the structure to not injure yourself. This is a part of peaking your strength in a deadlift and longevity in the sport and longevity in that specific exercise, which is the deadlift. So 3 to 6 reps, choose a variation where it's not the actual conventional deadlift. Of course you can if you want, but in my preference, I like to go a variation of the deadlift that is still not allowing you to go as heavy as possible. So we went snatch grip deadlift from a deficit, high volume. Pause deficit deadlift, lower volume and heavier loads. And then in the next phase, that's where we peak our strength. So that's going to be, so after this phase, I've said to you guys it's a 12-week program, which would suggest 4 weeks on hypertrophy or accumulation, 4 weeks on strength or intensification, and then 4 weeks on peaking. But you can spend 8 weeks on hypertrophy and 8 weeks on strength. But I don't recommend you go more than 4 weeks on peaking okay? And I'll explain why. So I'm going to do a few other accessory exercises. This isn't it. So I did, 3x3 pause deficit deadlifts, and now I'm going to do some complementary exercises. I'm going to do some hamstring curls and some 45-degree back extensions. And I'll explain why I'm doing that in a moment, but that's a part of this program. So for the 10x6 snatch grip, no accessories. For this one, 3x3 is not a huge amount of volume. I can afford to do accessories. So hamstring curls is important. This isn't the best exercise for hamstrings, but strong hamstring is important for having a strong body and a strong posterior chain. And then 45-degree back extensions, I love that exercise to throw in a little bit more volume and strengthen the glutes in the fully shortened position. So deadlifts, squats, so deadlifts that's most tensions on the glutes in the length, that's where I stretch my glutes. Whereas the 45-degree back extension, most of the tension is placed in the fully shortened position, which has a great carryover to lockout strength. But in my opinion, it's good to have strength in every muscle through all ranges of motion, fully lengthened and fully contracted. Either way, the 3 exercises that I'm choosing today, deadlift, hamstring curl, and 45-degree back extension, are all non-overlapping. The choice of exercise, they all target something slightly different to each other. And that's my strength phase, where I'm still providing myself with enough volume to make sure that I don't lose muscle mass, right? So that's a big part of, there's a muscle building phase, which is higher volume. Now I've gone to the strength phase. Doing the strength phase doesn't mean you're going to lose muscle just because it's not a specific muscle building phase. The choice of exercise makes sure I'm either maintaining or even still slightly building muscle. The main focus is strength, of course, but muscle is a side effect. Now, that's, for this program, 4 weeks of accumulation, 4 weeks of strength or intensification. Then, so as I said, you can take those longer than 4 weeks. Peaking phase. Don't take that for longer than 4 weeks. What is a peaking phase? The idea of peaking in strength, this is something that I'm very good at. And if you look at people like Thor Bjornsson, that's kind of proof is in the pudding. He did, through his programming, he never lifts heavy in his training. But then he manages to do the heaviest weights ever on competition day when it counts, right? So his last deadlift before a 510 kilogram deadlift, his last deadlift session, I think it was 460 double. Was it 460 double? Something like that. And then he did 510 for 1. The prep before that, it was a 480 single, and then he did 505 for 1. So we never go as heavy because he's not able to go as heavy, and it's very fatiguing. So what we do with our peaking, the idea of peaking is most times the training that you accumulate in that, we've just done 8 weeks of training, that's accumulated fatigue. So what you want to do is reduce the fatigue. One of the biggest contributors to your fatigue is volume. So that's what we want to get rid of. So when we talk about peaking, what you want to do is the really, really important work, which is specificity. So for a deadlift, the program in the last 4 weeks, the peaking phase, should be the exact movement you want to peak on, which is going to be the conventional deadlift. Same applies for all of the lifts. The peaking phase is specificity to the highest degree. Now, you want to reduce volume. So how do we do that? What we do is we cut out the accessory exercises that aren't the deadlift, right? So on my peaking phase, it doesn't mean you can't do accessories. You can do some, but if you do accessories, you want to factor in accessories that come at a low cost of fatigue. So that's what I'm doing now, hamstring curls. You could add those in. You could do conventional deadlifts and hamstring curls, and then that's it. So the reason why you don't go for a long period of time in your peaking is because we've reduced volume to the degree that if you stay on that program for long enough, you will lose muscle. So that's why I say don't do it for longer than 4 weeks. Now, the way that I do my peaking phase is you work towards being able to do a heavy single. Now, if it's a 4-week peaking phase, because I'm giving you guys a 12-week strategy, I'll tell you the exact strategy that I like to start people on. Over 4 weeks, I like to do a top set and some back down work. Right? I've spoken to you guys about top set, back down set method, one of my favorite ways. Week 1, 4 reps, top set of 4. Week 2, top set of 3. Week 3, top set of 2. Last week, final week, top set of 1. So you've gradually taught your body how to spend maximal effort on gradually decreasing reps. So if you just go straight from your hypertrophy phases, which is not very intelligent to go from a hypertrophy phase to then come and test your max, you're not going to be good at the skill of your max. So you have to gradually teach your body the skill of that heavy single. And that's my favorite way of introducing someone to a peak for the very first time, is gradual reduction of reps every single week. So top set of 4 and then 3x5. Top set of 3, 3x5. Top set of 2, 3x5. And top set of 1, 3x5. And then some hamstring curls after that. So that's a program for you.
Instead of doing 2 proper strength and hypertrophy
Phases, yeah.
You start with like 12 reps and reduce 1 rep each week, like 11 or 10.
oh yeah, that's purely linear periodization. This is what you have to understand. There are so many strategies. So you can do 12 weeks and go week 1, 12, and then 11, then 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes, you can. You can go 4 weeks on 12s, 4 weeks on 10s, 4 weeks of 8s, 4 weeks of 6s, 4 weeks of 4s, 4 weeks of 2s, and then peak. There are so many different strategies. That's linear. You can do, so that's more than 12 weeks as well. That's 4 weeks on every one of those damn rep ranges. How many weeks was that? That was like 28, 32 weeks or something like that. 32, 36 weeks. It could have been, you can do that for a whole year, absolutely. And a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot of people, most people at a high level compete multiple times in a year, so they don't do a year's worth of training to peak their max. So that's what you need to consider. How long do you have? That's how long you should take. Yeah, so yes, you know, like, and that's going to be so many questions that you guys have. What about this program? The answer is, yeah, you can. There's so many different programs. I'm just giving you one single strategy that really, really works. But if you follow those principles that I set out, which was to break it up into 3 phases: high volume, moderate volume, peak. That's the best way of building all the physical qualities that you need to peak without injuring yourself. Starting with high volume means low load. The higher the load, the easier or the higher the risk of injury. Okay, so low loads is a low risk of injury. That's where we start. We accumulate strength endurance and we build muscle to support the structures. That's the first phase. Start with, when you start your journey to a heavy deadlift, stop starting with testing heavy singles. It's not the smartest way of doing it. The best deadlifters in the world have probably experienced back pain, but the ones that haven't understand the value of high volume work in their off season to build the strength supporting the structure, so that when you do spend time on the heavy singles, you're not going to injure yourself. So choose your structure. There are many different ways of setting up your set scheme and different accessory exercises, but as long as the general trends are high volume, moderate volume, low volume, and peak, that's where you're going to get your best chance of not only, you know, reaching a really good, successful, heavy 1 RM, but also doing it without injuring yourself, which is one of the biggest fears when it comes to back. And that's why people say deadlifts are bad for your back. If you follow that structure, in addition to lifting with good technique, right? So I talk a lot about technique on my channel. You know, I've just given a bench press tutorial, in-depth bench press tutorial. You've probably posted. If you haven't seen it, click this link here. Put the link in, Musti. That one is pure gold. I'd may as well do one for deadlifts as well. But either way, this session, this video for you guys was all about creating a 12-week strategy. You know, make it 18 weeks, make it 20 weeks, whatever, extend those periods. It doesn't really matter, but you know, 12 weeks was just, you know, as an example. Follow that structure, follow that program. You will get stronger. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that session. I'm gonna bang out, I've got 19 minutes now before I've got to get on a work call. I'm gonna do some accessory exercises. I'm gonna do some 45-degree back extensions, and I'm gonna do some hamstring curls. So I don't have much time, so I'll probably do 2 sets of each. Let's start with the back extension. So that's the order that I would do it. Back extension first because it's harder before I go into my hamstring curls. Hamstring curls are the easiest one. So exercise order for you guys. Hardest exercise first when you've got the most energy. And then, you know, easiest exercise, save that for last. You can be so damn tired, but you can always fit in some hamstring curls. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, I've set this up. So I'm going to be doing back extensions. Now, I love this exercise. Look at the position I'm in here. I'm unloading my spine. So it's a bit of a decompression exercise. There's so much compression loading with my deadlifts. I love to decompress the spine here. Anyway. "15 reps, I like 15 rep range for that exercise. Any less than that kind of doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't feel like I've stimulated the muscle. This is one of those exercises that just suits high reps, just like a deadlift just suits low reps. So when you're mixing and matching exercises and you're thinking about what's the appropriate rep range for the session, one important rule you have to remember: every exercise comes with a different profile, and you need to respect that. So in general, the more compound the exercise, the lower the reps. The more isolated, the higher the reps. So my accessories are typically higher reps, and my main work is those reps that I prescribed for you guys for the program. That's the main work. When you're doing accessories, change the rules. It doesn't have to be the same reps. Anyway, let me catch my breath. One more set. I hope you enjoyed that session. That's 22 years as an industry professional, as an elite lifter, as a pretty damn good coach, giving you my deadlift lessons for free. Hope you enjoyed. See you guys next time.